Judges chapter 7, let's stand together. And we're going to read verses 16 to 22. And he divided the 300 men into 3 companies and put trumpets into the hands of all of them and empty jars with torches inside the jars. And he said to them, "Look at me and do likewise. When I come to the outskirts of the camp, do as I do. When I blow the trumpets, I and all who are with me, then blow the trumpets also on every side of all the camp, and shout for the Lord and for Gideon." So Gideon and the 100 men who were with him came to the outskirts of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, when they had just set the watch, and they blew the trumpets and smashed the jars that were in their hands. Then the 3 companies blew the trumpets and broke the jars. They held in their left hand the torches, and in their right hands the trumpets to blow, and they cried out, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." Every man stood in his place around the camp. And all the army ran. They cried out and fled, and they blew the 300 trumpets. The Lord set every man's sword against his comrade, and again all the army. And the army fled as far as Beth Shittah towards Zerah, as far as the border of Abel Molalah to Tabbath. Lord, today as we consider the study, Lord, I just thank you for the challenges that are in it. I thank you for your promises that are revealed to Gideon and to his 300 and to those of Israel who followed in after this event, Lord. I thank you for the way that you prove yourself miraculous and true. We just ask for you to teach our hearts today in Jesus' name. Amen. You may be seated. You know, one of the most difficult things to do in life is to just simply trust. The act of trusting is very difficult for us humans. That is, instead of being in control, instead of doing something yourself, instead of having the power and the authority to make things happen your way on your timeline, you just have to sit back and let it be done by someone else. Sometimes it's something that you yourself can do, but for some reason the Lord is not allowing you. I know you can do this, but I'm not allowing you to do this. You just need to trust me and just let it happen. So you wait. You wait for the Lord to do it. Sometimes it's something that has to happen, and there's no other option. You know, maybe it's just out of your control, but it's beyond your financial ability, or it's a medical thing, or it's an employment situation. It's just something that is beyond you, but something has to happen, or you'll have to quit, or you'll have to move, or you'll get sicker, or you'll lose everything. Just something has to happen. And it's out of your control, and you just have to trust. Sometimes it's just a simple promise. Like someone has come to you and said, "I will do this for you. I promise that I will come through for you." And so you place your hope in that promise, but it still requires waiting and trusting. And one day that promise may or may not come to pass. But once you're hopefully invested in a promise, you just have to trust and wait, and it's out of your hands. Trusting is hard because you are guaranteed to be disappointed at times. You're guaranteed to be let down. You are guaranteed at times to not receive what you had expected to receive. Sometimes we trust with misplaced expectations. We have an expectation of what should happen, and we trust that it will come to us in the way that we expect it to, and then it doesn't. It comes some other way. Sometimes we trust without a proper understanding of what we're trusting in. Sometimes we trust, but we don't understand the timeline. The Lord has given us a promise, but He has His timeline, and it's not lining up with our timeline. Sometimes we trust, but then life happens. Bad things happen, and people change, and people die, and people move away, and situations change, and we change, and it just doesn't work out the way we had hoped it would. We trust in the promise of a man who might not keep his promise. We trust in our misplaced understandings of of God and his word. We just don't really see his word as God intended us to see it. And when things happen God's way rather than our way, oftentimes, we humans, we're the ones blaming the God who knows everything simply because we know nothing. But the problem is we don't realize we know nothing. There are a lot of trustworthy people in the world, but there's also a lot of untrustworthy people. There are people who lack moral compass. They think nothing of lies and deceit. It's just easy for them. There are also people who fail our trust because they just messed up and they made a promise that they couldn't keep, or they just forgot. And our most natural response after a time of being burned and being let down is just to not trust. Isn't it sad that sometimes our very first instinct is to distrust? The moment the phone rings and it's somebody who wants to sell us something, we distrust them, and you should. But then we take that distrust and we apply it to people just on a natural level of conversation, and immediately we are distrusting because we think that we might get burned, we might get ripped off, we might get let down. Experience tells us that it might happen. So we're hesitant. We prepare ourselves. We protect ourselves. There's an old saying that states, the one who trusts men will make fewer mistakes than the one who distrusts men. And that's in the context of learning things and understanding new things. When I'm trying to learn a new thing, I would rather learn from someone who knows what they're doing before I try to figure it out on my own. I learned how to fly fish this year. I had tried before, but it was just frustrating because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have the right equipment. I didn't have the things worked out the way they were supposed to be. I was doing things wrong, and so it was just frustrating, and I just wanted to throw the fly rod that my stepdad gave me in the river, and I think I probably did a couple times. I got it out. But Orvis has a free class on Saturdays. They'll teach you how to fly fish, or at least how to cast. It's like, wow, it's actually easier than I thought. But I had to have someone to show me how to do it. And then if you're going to fly fish, you need to learn about the lures, which are called flies. That's why they call it fly fishing. And so I learned how to tie flies, but not on my own. I learned from people who knew how to do it. And I talked to people, and I watched videos, and I talked to the guy at the fly shop before I ever put a hook in a vise. And the cool thing is, the very first fly I made, I caught fish with that thing. It was incredible. If someone knows more than you, and they're willing to share with you what they know, you should trust what they have to share. In today's story, Gideon had to place some serious trust in the Lord. I mean, he was really putting himself out there. Not just him, but he and 300 people. He was putting them all in a place of great danger and great risk, and he just had to trust in the Lord to take care of it. The God who knows everything called the man who knew nothing to trust him. And after God bolstered his faith a few times, Gideon confidently put his trust in the Lord. Not only that, but thousands of men who came to fight with him. They came because they knew that Gideon was trusting in the Lord. So they all came to fight with him. But also, most of them were sent away because of their fear. And they trusted that Gideon knew what he was doing. Not only that, but 300 men remained who simply just were not afraid and drank water in a particular way. And they're like, we're with you just because we drank water differently? Yes, you are. Well, I would like to drink water the way everyone else does, but I have bad knees. I didn't want to get my shirt dirty. A lot of people say, these are the alert men. That's why they bring water up. But as I shared last week, I think it's more about these are the guys with bad knees and big bellies and people that didn't want to get their shirts dirty. So that's, those are the guys that Gideon picked. That's just my opinion. That's not Bible. You can put that in a note somewhere. Something to consider. But these 300 guys had to trust the man who was simply trusting God. And as a result, their trust proved true. And it became evident in Judges chapter 7, verse 21. This is where the Lord just said, this is the part that I really want you to focus in on, Chad, because this part is for you. Every man stood in his place around the camp, and all the army ran. They cried out and fled. This is the part that the Lord said, if you highlight anything, if you underline anything, if you focus on anything, this is the part that was for me. They just stood still and watched. They had to trust in the Lord to do it, and that's what happened. All they were doing was breaking pots and holding torches and shouting and blowing trumpets. Any of us could have done that. It does not require skill. Maybe the blowing the trumpet thing requires a little skill, but that's all they had to do. And just stand there in one place and watch the Lord give them the victory. Have you ever been reading the Bible and that verse just stood out to you in such a way that the rest of the passage around it just became a fog? It became a blur. It's just all about this one part because the Lord has a message for you in it. That's what I felt like was happening with this little line. They just all stood still and they watched the Lord do the work. They trusted in him. God is making it obvious that this verse contains a unique message for me. So maybe if there's a unique message for me, maybe there's a unique message for you, for this moment in time concerning the things that we are going through right now. For me, that's what's going on in verse 21. It's the one verse in this whole passage. And believe me, I studied all the way up to Jephthah in preparation for this. But this is the one verse that captured my attention for two reasons. I have had the privilege and the opportunity in my life many times to just simply stand still and watch the Lord bring the victory. I didn't have to step into the fight. He just did it. Time and time again, I trusted and he came through. And because of this experience, the second reason might sound absurd, but even though God has proven himself trustworthy more times than I can recount, I need this message in my life right now because like the man who brought his sick child to Jesus, I'm always coming back to that place where I say, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. And Gideon was a guy who was always saying, help my unbelief. Lord, just one more time, make this wet, make this dry. Okay, I know, Lord, please don't get angry, but make this dry and make this wet. And the Lord even knew he was fearful and said, Gideon, I want to give you a present. Go down and listen to these guys. I want to bolster your faith because I know you're still struggling, and you're going to hear them tell a story of how right now there is dread in the camp, and your name is attached to that. They are afraid of you. And I know that my experience is not unique. I know that this is the nature of our humanity, of our broken minds and our failing bodies, when we can't control things, when we can't ensure the outcome ourselves, when we have to stand still and just trust something to happen. We can't do anything about it. It's hard. It's difficult to do that. It's a complete and total affront to everything that is within us. And the Lord has been making it clear to me, and hopefully he's been making it clear in your lives also, that in spite of our compulsions to take charge and do things on our own and just to step in and to make things happen, for now, for this day, for this week, for this month, sometimes we just need to stand still and let the Lord do what we can't do. And he has not disappointed me yet. Turning your Bibles back to the book of Exodus. Exodus chapter 14. We're going to look at verses 13 through 14, where the people of Israel were in this position where all they could really do is just stand and see what the Lord was going to do. Exodus 14, verses 13 through 14. And Moses said to the people, fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians, who you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent. The Israelites were in a difficult spot. I mean, Moses had seriously hacked off Pharaoh. He had burned every bridge back. And for some reason, Moses led them to a dead end. It's like, Moses, there's nowhere for us to go. There's the ocean on one side, and there's a very angry Pharaoh and an army on the other side. They were in that place where they had to trust in a man who was trusting in God, and they were not at all happy about it. Moses, what have you done? I mean, we could have at least stayed there and been slaves. We would have at least been alive, but now we're going to be destroyed. But Moses responded to them with this challenge. Don't fear. Stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. The enemy you see today, you will not see again. And they may have thought, we won't see them again because we'll be dead. No, the Lord is going to win this victory. You will not see them again because they will be dead. They will be gone. Just be silent. Isn't it hard to be silent? I mean, when you're just like, but Lord, no, just be silent. Just wait. Stand still. Be silent. Why? Because God is going to take care of it. It's out of your control. It's in his control. He knows everything. You know nothing. And I'm so confident that compared to the Lord, I know nothing. And I'm so confident that I can put my trust in the one who knows everything. Now turn over to the right. 2 Chronicles chapter 20, verse 17. A very similar story. 2 Chronicles 20, verse 17. It says there, you will not need to fight in this battle. Stand firm. Hold your position and see the salvation of the Lord on your behalf. O Judah and Jerusalem, do not be afraid and do not be dismayed. Tomorrow go out against them, and the Lord will be with you. So the enemy which had come against God's people was formidable. It was huge. In fact, earlier in this chapter, this enemy was referred to as a great horde. And as he sought the Lord, Jehoshaphat said that they were powerless against this great horde. Lord, they are so huge and we are so small. We are powerless against them. The Moabites and the Ammonites and the Munitites gathered together against Israel. And as a result, Jehoshaphat, instead of running and crying in fear, he did the right thing. He went to the Lord. And he cried out in prayer, and a prophetic response came through Jehaziel, the son of Zechariah. And he told them in verse 15, do not be afraid. Do not be dismayed at this great horde. For the battle is not yours, but it's God's. It's his battle. You can just let go. Just let God have it. But they're coming against us. I know, but just let it be the Lord's battle, not yours. So as they went to see the result of God's promise, they sang songs of praise to God. I love that. Let's go to battle. Let's get people up front worshiping the Lord. And we'll go out to watch and see what the Lord is going to do. Now imagine the confidence they had in the Lord. That they just went out praising him, thanking him, honoring him, exalting him already, knowing that he was going to come through on his promise. They went to the battle not to fight, but to see. And I love the fact that they went worshiping. You know, the Lord is always going to bring us up against some kind of army, some kind of battle, some kind of challenge. The Lord is always going to put us in a position where he wants us to be trusting in him. Now, it's part of the relationship he wants with us. He wants us to trust in him. He wants us to look to him as our provider. He wants us to acknowledge him in all things. So he's going to put us in situations and scenarios which are intended to draw our attention back to him and to look to him and to trust in him. God wants us to trust. He wants to take care of us. He wants to rescue us. He wants to be made known in our lives. So yes, we will often have the opportunity to lean on him and trust in him. That means that there will be many times where we're up against a great army, a great horde, something that we look at and we say, we are defenseless against this enemy. We will often have the opportunity to go and just watch as he does the miraculous work of delivering us. We are always up against something. So let me ask you this. As you go up against this enemy, does your mind ever go to worship? Does your mind ever go to thanksgiving? Does your mind ever go to the acknowledgement of how great God is? When you look at the great horde, the great circumstances which are gathered against you, does your mind ever go to the fact and the reality that God is holy and God is worthy of our praise? Have you faced your trials with a song of praise in your lips? Doesn't it seem inappropriate? Doesn't it just seem wrong? Because the right response is to worry and be fearful, and I'm really good at that. And I am so good at that. I am a pro. If you want to know how to worry, I could put on a workshop. But here we have this great example. Face your armies and your trials with praise, with worship. Listen, I know it's hard to get here on time for some folks. I know it's hard to get anywhere on time. I know if we had church at 10:30, people still wouldn't come till 10:50. I know if we had church at 11, people still wouldn't come till 11:20. I just know that's the nature of it. But I have to tell you, if you got here 20 or 30 minutes late, you missed the most important thing we do here. The most important thing we do is we gather together and we worship the Lord. We exalt his name. We give thanks to him. We glorify him. The sanctuary is almost empty when we begin to worship. It fills up when it's time for the sermon, as if, this is a better thing than that. It's not. Jehoshaphat's army didn't have a Bible study on their way to see the victory of God over the enemies. They worshiped the Lord. They went to battle worshiping. They didn't say, okay, right before the battle, we're going to stop and have a Bible study. They didn't have a Bible study. They just worshiped. It was that important. In Isaiah chapter 12, verse 2, it says, "Behold, God is my salvation. I will trust and will not be afraid. For the Lord God is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation." We affirm in these Bible studies, God is my salvation, God is my strength. But are we affirming in times of worship that he is our song? That he is the reason why we sing? If you're not doing it here with us on Sundays, and I know a lot of people who come for the Bible studies aren't coming for worship, I hope you're finding regular times in your life to declare the goodness of the Lord. Recently in my personal time, I started reading through Lamentations. I just took a break from Proverbs and Psalms, which is something I try to read regularly, and I've moved over to Lamentations, and there's a lot of good stuff, a lot of good human stuff in Lamentations. A lot of things that we read there and just say, as a human who is broken and frail and struggling in this life, I relate to what is being written here. And this passage stood out to me recently. Lamentations chapter 3, verses 24 through 26. "The Lord is my portion, says my soul, therefore I will hope in him. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul who seeks him. It is good that one should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord." So the first question, is he your Lord? Is he the one who is the ultimate authority over your life, whom you serve? Is he your Lord? Then if so, you should have your hope in him. Hope is a positive expectation. As I always tell you, hope is such an important thing, so I always reaffirm this. Hope is something that we know will come to pass because the Lord has promised it. We place our hope in the Lord, and we know that he's going to come through. Next question, do you want his goodness in your life? Anyone here today want the goodness of the Lord in your life? Yeah. Some of you aren't raising your hands. My son Dylan does not want the goodness of the Lord in his life. Then wait for him and seek him. Do you want to do something that is good? Anyone want to do something that's good? Don't raise your hand, I'll make a mockery of you. Then wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. I love that. Lord, I want this good stuff. I want your goodness in my life. I want to do something that is good. So I'm going to hope in you. And I'm going to wait for you. And I'm going to seek you. And I'm going to trust in your salvation day in and day out. A lot of us have been up to Headwaters Lodge up there in Highland County, where we go and we do our own personal men's retreats and different things. And it's a remote location in Highland County. I love it. There's no cell signals up there, no nothing, no phone, no internet, no highways. There's nothing but nature. And the theme verse of Headwaters Lodge is Psalm 46, verse 10. And a few years ago, I'm a stickler for context. And so I thought, I wonder what the context of that verse is. Be still and know that I am God. When you go to Headwaters Lodge, you're going to see that everywhere. Be still and know that I am God. Guys, you've come to this remote location, and our goal here is so that you can be still and know that I am God. But biblically speaking, Headwaters Lodge is the most inappropriate place to consider what this verse is saying in context. Because what's going on in this psalm is not going on at Headwaters Lodge. It's quiet there. It's peaceful there. It's an easy place to be still and know. But listen to what this passage is saying. Psalm 46, beginning at verse 6. The nations rage. The kingdoms totter. He utters his voice. The earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Selah. Come behold the works of the Lord, how he has brought desolation on the earth. He makes war cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the chariots with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted amongst the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. So think about this. Be still in the midst of the worldly rage that is going on around you. In the midst of natural disaster. As the earth shakes, as mountains explode, as storms level everything in their path, in the midst of battle, in the aftermath, when the ground is scorched and the stench of death fills the air and there's dread and there's fear, be still and know that I am God. Why? Because this is his promise. He will be exalted amongst those raging nations. He will be exalted in this earth. God told the children of Israel in Isaiah chapter 41, verse 10, fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. He promises to bring to nothing those who oppose him. He promises to hold the right hand of his people. He affirms in verse 13 that he, the God who knows everything, is the one who makes these promises. In Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 through 6, we are given a very familiar promise. God promises to make our paths straight. I mean, I like a straight path. Julie and I walked the Monticello Trail yesterday morning, and it's just a wide, it meanders a little bit, but it's straight compared to a hike I recently did in Shenandoah, which was zigzagging up a mountain. It was rugged, and it was rough, and it was difficult. And by the time I got to the top of that mountain, I think I died. I couldn't walk for days. I couldn't go downstairs, that's for sure. God promises to make our path straight. There might be armies of the enemy, great challenges of opposition, financial stress, uncertainty, bad health, whatever. These things are just always realities in our lives. But he promises to give us a straight path through all of this kind of stuff if we do three things. If we trust in him with all our hearts, if we stop leaning on our own understanding. I struggle with that one. And if we, in all our ways, acknowledge him. Romans 8, verses 28 through 31 reads, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good. For those who are called according to his purpose, for those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn amongst many brothers. And those whom he predestined, he also called. And those whom he called, he also justified. And those whom he justified, he also glorified. What then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, do you know the rest? Who can be against us? Family, we might have to trudge our way through a few battlefields now and then. We might have to face unconquerable circumstances in our own understanding and the perception that we have. But if we truly believe that we have been called by God according to his purpose, not our purpose, but his purpose, and sometimes that's the hard part. If we truly believe that he is fully invested in us, and he has been invested in us before we were even born, he knew us in eternity past, and he gave us a destiny. He destined us to be conformed into the image of his Son, the image of holiness, the image of righteousness, the image of acceptance into his presence, the image that we acquired the moment we surrendered our lives to Jesus. He knew we were going to have that all along. He was invested. He has promised that things are going to work together for good as he has determined good. Once again, not our understanding, but his. God's definition of good might be different than ours. God often has a bigger picture in mind than we do. We think that it would be good to have a nice house and a great job and the perfect family, and God thinks that it would be great that we would become well-honed tools that reflect his glory in this world, and we might become those not by having the nice stuff, but by suffering. We see many Christians throughout the world who are suffering. I love the final line of this passage. If God is for us, who can be against us? Listen, I'm not up here as an authority on faith in the face of hardship and trial. I mean, yesterday I was talking to a friend of mine. He says, "What are you preaching on tomorrow?" And I said, "Just this passage about standing still and seeing the Lord bring the victory." And I have to go up there and pretend like I'm an authority on this stuff when I'm really the guy that should be sitting in the back row hanging his head in light of this message. People followed Gideon and Moses because Gideon and Moses trusted God. Those who followed didn't always share that confidence, but they followed recognizing that Gideon and Moses had real faith. They have real faith. I'm struggling in my faith, but they have real faith, so I'm going to follow them. I'm putting my confidence in them because they are putting their confidence in the Lord. And sometimes in life, I get to be Gideon and I get to be Moses. And I say, we're going forth. And you say, Chad really has faith in this. I'm struggling with it, but I'm going to go forward knowing that he is confident. But sometimes I'm the one who is looking to Gideon's and Moses's in my life. Others have displayed great faith about armies which mount against me, and I'm often the one who's over on the sidelines leaning on my own understandings, but I'm also learning to follow the words and the testimonies and the examples of those who are simply trusting in the Lord. That's what being family is all about. Being in community with one another. It's all about leaning on each other and trusting in how God is working in other people's lives. And sometimes we just have to say, the Lord is there. I'm going to follow that example. The Lord is moving there. I'm going to follow that example. Will we be disappointed at times? Absolutely. But the more times we follow those who are faithful, the more times we will likely see the miraculous hand of God working in our midst. When we think we know something, that is, when we think we know something better than God, we will fail every time in our call to trust God. We need to follow the examples that we see in these passages, in Gideon, in Moses, in Jehoshaphat, in the teachings of Apostle Paul. They followed the God who knows everything because they realized in light of him, they knew nothing. They knew nothing. And so I want to close with this. May we be those who know nothing. May we be those who stand still and trust in God and do what God does because he knows everything.